together, and the way that the careful listening that you put to the poems that came before you and your responses to them. Just lovely. You really set the tone for the evening. And thank you to all the open mic readers. I was blown away by the imagery, your lines, some of your endings. You just stuck your endings. So it was a very rich evening for me as a listener. Thank you. The first poem I'm going to read from Pineapple Express, Leanne mentioned that she was a student in the class that I teach at SFU with Fiona Tinway Lamb. And this was the poem that I wrote for the students to their alarm, actually, because many of the people who are drawn to poetry are such lovely, kind people, and being a bit of a perverse person, I wanted to write a poem about the pleasure of cruelty. It's called Earthworms. I used to chop them up as a child, I confessed to the roomful of poetry students, expecting collusion. Weren't all children cruel? But their dismayed faces said no. We had just read a poem about earthworms, sprawled in the hundreds across the sidewalk after a deluge, the poet stepping gingerly among the stranded creatures. Again, I saw myself crouched on the pavement, penknife poised above a meaty tango, halving, quartering, wondering when the worms would stop regenerating, if that was a myth anyway, nearly weeping with the power I wielded. In my mother's garden, I observed the heave of a slug's body sprinkled with salt, a spider's 8 legs cringing under a cloud of insecticide, the satisfying crunch of a snail's whorled house underfoot, the destruction of that architecture like the snap and crackle of shells on a beach. The students' upturned faces trusting me with their fragile words. What would they think of the shining hours I spent by the balcony doors, torturing flies? Watching their frantic skitter up the glass as my scissors flashed over their intricate bodies, snipping away a gossamer wing, a quivering leg. I'm not talking a shameful episode or two after being scolded or spanked. This was a private hobby in the slow hours of summer, a kind of heaven to inhabit a time outside of time, a bubble of pure concentration. How lovely it was to be the bully for a change. The next poem I'm going to read, many of you know the wonderful BC poet Kate Braid, and I believe she actually is living in Victoria now, yes? And she hosted this very interesting salon in her apartment a few years ago, in which she wanted a number of local poets to come and wrestle with the concept of the role of the poet. And this was, we all kind of, came up with various things hesitantly, and none of us were really able to articulate how we saw the role of the poet in society. And this was the poem that for me came out of that effort to engage with that concept. It's called Kate Braid's Salon, The Role of the Poet. We thought we had a gift, that we were blessed. So early on, we felt that spasm of difference, a calling religious in its fierce devotion, its blindness to any other point of view. Families, lovers, were scraps caught up in our storms of creativity, their private lives ransacked for inspiration, collateral damage in the cause of poetry. Now we gather at Kate's in the heat and confusion of middle age, greeting each other by the wrong names, still searching for the right words, eager to justify this work by which we have measured our lives. Elise in her blue cancer bonnet, her face lifting like a sunflower. Catherine in her Tweety bird knee-highs, defiant as a teenager. struggling to define the role of poet in this shuttered room lined with books and art on one of those rare October days on fire with sunshine. Young men shirtless on the seawall, dogs on paddleboards in the creek. Was it a mistake to answer this call? Maybe outside was the answer all along, the bright, buzzing world of skateboarders, cyclists, and joggers, but instead we turned inward, counting the bones of the dead, plucking our own nerves in blank rooms with the blinds drawn, as if the fate of the planet depended on finding the right metaphor. Given another chance, would we answer that call now? Would we name it blessing or curse? Or would we crank the windows open to the chaos of car horns and cat calls, race downstairs to the street, hurl ourselves into what's left of this dazzling day? So, you know, some of these poems kind of engage with that ambivalence about writing poetry. I liked what one of you, Will, I think it was, said about how, you know, real poets, unlike us, actually are, what was it, snaggle-toothed and something.
Twisted, gnarled, ancient beings.
Yeah, okay. We feel that way internally, but we try not to look that way externally, although we're all getting there. This poem I haven't read before. I don't know why exactly, maybe because it's a quieter one, but I think even though this book was written before the pandemic, the idea of solitude and of course its necessity to poetry is throughout the book, and it's highlighted in this poem. It's called A Weekend Alone. A weekend alone. You pace the seawall in both directions, gape at flat screen TV, sleep like a bear shot full of tranquilizers. You are bored with words, their clamor and confusion, the way they beg you to play with them all day, needy as small children. A blank fog smothers the bay. 3 herons stalk the shoreline, pale as pencil sketches. The tide draws back like a sheet, rubbed rocks, salt-rimmed shells, scoured by seagulls, blasted black beach. An old friend stops you on the street in the rain. Words float out of your mouth, but there's so little left to say. It's the pills, the flat horizon of mood. It's like speaking a foreign language, translating inside your head. You have to squint to see daisy blue sky above the thunderclouds. At home, a songbird thumps against your window, chased by a crow. Frantic, it's still singing, a shrill of panic in the stone-paved garden. Yet there you sat, smiling, thinking it was singing with joy. We were talking about weather earlier, and the book is largely about emotional weather systems, but of course there are very real weather systems on the West Coast that can contribute to the internal ones as well too. So the title poem is called Pineapple Express. The antidepressants teach you stillness. They teach you to be still for hours, curled like a jelly bean in the beanbag chair, fetal on the daybed, the glass-walled room bobbing on an ocean of vertigo. Never in your life have you been so still. The Silicon Valley millionaires who flock to Kathmandu in search of serenity would be envious. Their master, even. You are the smallest living thing in nature, ladybug perched on a leaf, close to nothingness. Now that the rush and clamor of the crowded world has receded, you can hear it clearly, the silence of the clock, the phone, the timelessness of being adrift in the day. Sometimes a squall of rain blows through, white pearls tossed from the sky, nearly tropical in its intensity, brevity. You've rarely been so content with so little? Or is this plenitude? This one room, a box of light, bought with decades of labor, populated with unseen things, spider shriveled on the sill, moth munching a sweater, water dripping in the fridge, the toilet. You, motionless as a column of rocks on the shore, watching the storm blaze the horizon, letting it come. So this next poem I think of as a companion piece to that poem. And one of the things I was interested in exploring in this collection was medications and their different effects on mood and on impulses and on the body as well too. So this is called Side Effects. They warn you about increased sweating, but it's the cold that sneaks through, an Arctic chill that seeps into your core, unrelieved by fuzzy blankets and indoor heat, so that you fantasize about nuzzling into the steaming innards of a slaughtered animal, bedding down in blood. They warn you about decreased appetite, but it's the carb cravings that seize and shake you in the bakery aisle, you who never cared for bread, who happily discarded the lid on a burger, who preferred sandwiches open-faced to display their rich, spiced fillings. You watch in awe as your disembodied hand stuffs a sack with multigrain rolls, crusty baguettes, hot cross buns by the half dozen. The marshmallow flesh at the center of a loaf melts like tenderloin in your mouth. They warn you about difficulty sleeping, but you are sleeping like you've never slept before, peeling off your clothes with the haste of a lover in the indecent light of afternoon. You are ready for bed the moment you finish breakfast. There's so much happening in that other land. You are winning arguments lost decades ago, smiling at well-wishers you snubbed, visiting loved ones who died while you were busy with your cruel young life. They warn you it will take a week or two, maybe a month, up to 6 weeks for the antidepressants to take effect. And this much seems true. You wait, breathe in and out, listen for the internal roar to subside. So for the last two poems, we'll take a little trip down to the States. All my life, all my adult life, I've been fascinated by America, and that has never made me popular among Canadian, I think, writers and artists, because America has always been kind of seen as the evil empire, and certainly in the last few years, it has engaged our thoughts and our attention in ways that we never imagined. But I've always been fascinated by its dichotomies, its beauty and its wretchedness, I guess, its poverty in other ways. So the two poems I'm going to read from the section called, what is it called? Sunset Boulevard. It takes place in a couple of different places. And the first poem is called Sunset Boulevard, and the quote that I use is one that is quite well known by John Updike, which is, "America is a vast conspiracy to make you happy." Under the sun's sizzle, your skin itches, erupts, takes on the crispy bubbled texture of pork crackling. Hollywood's blank sky busts with billboards, free HIV tests. Finally, you're happy, almost. That mid-afternoon giddiness when serotonin spikes, you could be a character in a cartoon, blooping your way through the pixelated day. In a motel on Sunset Boulevard, cigarette butts and palm fronds litter the parking lot, and you're grateful for your life elsewhere, away from the dream. Because what are the chances you'd have scored that glass house on the beach, all skylights and swooping staircases? No, it would have been cinder block apartment with bars over the windows, shopping at the 99-cent store, dodging cockroaches skittering across the sidewalk that heaves in perpetual earthquake. liquor stores on every corner, a food desert of fast food joints, gas station marts, churches, strip malls, and boarded up businesses with misspelled signs. Across the freeway, kids toss a ball back and forth in a concrete enclosure outside their complex called something or other, manor or paradise. So my last poem, also in California. So this is called Pacific Inn, San Diego. Amtrak passes in the night, a rumble on the wrong side of the tracks. The homeless in San Diego have been sun roasted into psychosis, ponchos caked desert brown, faces spiked like cacti. Afternoons, you nest in the lobbies of luxury hotels, pretend you belong among white orchids and golden chandeliers. Avail yourself of free internet in the business center. Avoid the doors marked private banking. The paper towels in the granite bathroom seem spun from silk and linen, the finest vellum on which to pen your poems. By economic measures, you've failed at everything. Is this what's called falling out of the middle class? Now the dollar is below 75 cents, and at Whole Foods, you can't afford to eat the rainbow. You pay with a clutch of coupons, order tap water from the dwindling resource. Shame is a spending spree, a waste of energy. A store owner gives you a too ripe persimmon. You carry it through the streets of Little Italy like a beating heart cupped in your palm. 30 years ago, you were a homeless teenager, and now you remember how to live on nothing. Thank you so much.
More.
Evelyn, there is a outcry here that your reading is too short. Would you please indulge us to read a couple more?
I have no idea of time. I'm always paranoid of
No. There's encore. Please, more poems.
Be careful what you wish for.
Especially that American stuff. I really like that.
Well, you know how now so many poets go through MFA programs, and they're all told to, stick to their time limit, right? And they are very obedient about that. I still remember the days when poets would be terrified to get up on stage, and they'd have to get drunk beforehand. And then once they got up there, you couldn't get them off, right? Because they'd gone through such hell to get to that point where they were finally able to read their work. And then, I remember one time Susan Musgrave, she literally had to drag somebody off the stage, poor guy. Are you sure?
Absolutely. No, please. There's definitely time for you to read more poems. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, I'll do two more. January, we're in January. So this is one thing you notice, after a while of writing poetry is that you have a poem for almost every occasion. So this is the January poem. These are the days of not writing. January, the month of no words. Wine tastes watered down. Food so flavorless, I gnaw a hole in the side of my mouth, mining the salt crystal of blood, its candy tang. The fog again, shrink-wrapping trees and buildings, erasing the bay. The opposite shore, a leaf etching under wax paper, milk glass, the faint sketch of a fossil in stone. It's not the light or lack of it. Small birds rustle in the bare trees, searching for winter berries. Nothing's missing. What's not here? So I'll end with a poem that takes us to a very different season. A few years ago, when the West Coast looked like the province might go up in smoke, there were so many wildfires all across the province. And this poem is about that, but it's also about not writing, which, that's unfortunately a subject. It's becoming a subject. So this is called Tinder Dry. This time, The silence goes on for weeks. In dreams, you write epics, ink dripping onto vellum, a flight of blackbirds, the land of the subconscious, lush as a rainforest. Summer started 2 months early and never went away. Everyone's too hot to move, gasping in the particulate air. The arrow bobbing into the red zone of extreme, each of us in our fire towers, scanning the horizon for a spark. Yesterday, you scuffed a heap of leaves underfoot, charred and chocolate brown in the first week of July. The trees have shrunk inward, conserving their cores by shedding even their branches, snapping off, slamming down on parked cars. Hundreds of wildfires across the province and our own small green world, bordered by blue, has become an inverted bowl, choked with smoke. Sand in the eyes, a scorched throat, each breath a slow burn, each exhale a smudge of charcoal. This air so parched and strange, your hands shake. You strain to sip some oxygen from the clogged atmosphere, cough and cough in the porous light. The maples along the seawall gone white like soda ash, heaps of salt. The beaten metal, copper and aluminum of the sea. You wake to a room all gold, walls painted gold, furniture cast in gold, sunlight shot through a brocade of smog. Someday soon, you think, the words will leave you, but you'll still be here. Thank you again.